Welcome back to Encut and welcome back to another industry interview. Today with us we have set decorator Yasmin Sethi.
This is the final part of our industry interview series for the movie Monkey Man. So if you missed our previous two episodes, make sure to check those out. Those will be linked below.
Yasmin has done set decoration for multiple movies like The White Tiger, The Sky is Pink, and Gold. And we had a lot of fun talking with her and seeing how her experience compares to Bollywood.
Without further ado, here is Yasmin Sethi.
So my name is Yasmin Sethi. I'm a production designer and set decorator, and I worked on Monkey Man, which is, I think, the movie we're going to talk about. I've also done a show for Amazon Prime Video called Sheher Lakot. I worked on White Tiger, which was a Netflix film earlier. Another film called Akhone, which is also on Netflix, and a bunch of other stuff before that.
Great, awesome. So just to start off, before we go into Monkey Man, I'm curious kind of what got you interested in the art department in general, and even working in film.
I have to say I fell into it by mistake. There was no real planning. I had studied design and product design, to be specific, and I had worked in New Delhi for a couple of years, and I'd quit my job. And that had been a very collaborative workspace and everything. And I'd gone to freelancing, which really meant that I was sitting alone in front of a computer for hours at end. And I realized that I really did not enjoy that. And I had a friend who was a first AD. And she was like, listen, why don't you try film? Send me your portfolio, I'll send it across to a few production designers and come to Bombay. She was going off on a long format, but she was traveling for 5 months and her house was empty, and she was very generous. And I thought, oh, this will be fun. I'll go for a couple of months and work and see what it's like. And then at the end of the day, maybe I'll go back to I'm looking for a job after that. And I sent out my portfolio to a couple of production designers. I got on to work on a film, and I enjoyed it so much that I never left.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
That is really happy.
yeah.
I think a quick question. I know this wasn't something that we sent you, but I am curious kind of like what if there's any differences you've noticed doing art department specifically in like Bollywood versus Hollywood, if there's any like glaring differences that you've noticed, or if they kind of function relatively the same.
So I have done a mix of both Bollywood and Hollywood, and I think that one of the key differences is that and Bollywood is getting better, is that Hollywood productions in general tend to be a little bit better planned, in the sense that not better planned. I just think that in India, there are lots of extenuating circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes permissions fall through and things change around because of actor dates or because there's a festival or something. So what happens is that the art department in particular, sometimes we get slammed because a set that we were supposed to do 3 months later gets pulled up. And I think that especially when I've worked on Hollywood stuff, they've just, I think, had, maybe they've been luckier. That might just be it. But we've had, in terms of the schedule progressing the way needed to, that's always worked out better. But I think also the other major difference is that in the Indian system of the art department, the rules are less defined. So, for example, in the West, you have a very specific prop master role, whereas in India, that's done by the art department as a whole. And you might have a prop master designation, but you very rarely have like a prop master team. So the thing is that as set decorator, you're also on Indian projects, you're also making sure that all the props are there and someone has all that is organized. So it's a lot more fluid and less distinct. Whereas in the Hollywood system, you have a prop master, you have an art director, you have a set decorator. Here, it's a little bit more, everyone does a bit of everything.
Yeah. We're split up.
So I think that's actually a really, really big difference in the way the department is run.
Is there a preference that you might have? Do you like having your specific duties, or do you like doing a little bit of everything?
So I think that while I like looking, because I've done a few jobs as production designer where you really do need to look at everything, I enjoy looking at everything. That's one thing. But I think that when I'm working as a set decorator and I have a prop master, it takes a lot of stress off your plate because you don't have to look at that as well. And especially with someone you work with and you trust to do their job, then it really means that you can focus on in that time your role. So I think that's one of the things that I've picked up in Hollywood projects, and I'm trying to incorporate when I'm doing stuff in India, for India. Just because I think that it's so important that you have people who you can hand off responsibility to, who you trust to do what they're supposed to do.
For sure.
And the thing is that sometimes you're scared that things will slip through the gaps.
Definitely. That kind of leads into like our next question, specifically with Monkey Man. I was curious how the pre-production process was like, how much involvement you guys worked together. I know we were talking to other folks, they were mentioning how with COVID and restrictions, you did a lot of your communication online. So I'm curious if you had like a similar experience with that.
So we did do a lot of our communication online. So the first bit of pre-prod, I'd actually did from India. And one of the things that came into play was the fact that because we were shooting a film that was set in India, but we're shooting it in Indonesia. So there were some things I needed to source, organize, and carry with me from here because you wouldn't get them in Batam and Indonesia. So at that point, in that beginning part of pre-prod, I was actually doing a little bit of work, also making sure that the props were organized because there was some stuff that was so India specific that I knew that we'll have to do them from here. So there was a lot of online, we did a lot of Zoom and all that, but we also had to work very collaboratively because we had to make sure that for every part of, whether it was for art direction, for the props department, for the set tech department, anything that I knew from experience we would struggle to get there, or some things that I assumed you'd be able to get there, but you couldn't because, and I worked very closely with Ahmad, who goes by Umba, as well as Guntur, who was working as a prop master, to make sure that everything that we needed, we sent. And we weren't getting to Batam. And it was a real process to get there. It took 3 days because of how complicated flights were and everything, that we could actually take everything in one swoop when we went.
Wow.
So, yeah.
It seems definitely like a lot of work, but I mean, we've heard before that this is a work of love and passion. And
Yes.
so I imagine that if you like it, you'll take it.
Right.
Yeah. It really is. I think that I think most parts of film are like that. The hours are so long and it's so hectic that the only way to survive in film in general, not just the art department, is if you really love what you do. Otherwise, you're not going to, because you're like, oh, I can do something where I can work 8 hours a day, and why do I have to work 12 or 13 or
Right.
15, you know? So I think that's one thing that cuts across film in general, that you have to really love what you do.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Going into how Monkey Man was made, I'm curious what it was like being on set, kind of what you specifically had to do on a day-to-day, and how like setting up the sets was like for you.
So I have to say that Monkey Man was a very different art department experience for me. There was a couple of reasons for this. One was that you were creating India in a country that was not India, which was the first time I had done that. Second is that we were doing it in a bubble. So much so that anyone who was inside the bubble couldn't leave it. So in fact, I didn't end up doing, besides that India part of sourcing that we did right from the beginning, I didn't step out into the markets or the prop shops or anything at all, because for that we had a team which was outside the bubble who would literally, we would communicate with, and who would come and hand us stuff that they had sourced locally, just to make sure that if you were outside the bubble, you didn't, they were being very cautious as well, but that you didn't actually bring anything in that, in terms of COVID. Like, so there was a full separation. So that was quite different. Second, it was very interesting because Pavas, who was a production designer, was Thai. Ahmad Umba was, he was Indonesian, I was Indian. So it was a very collaborative process because we all worked together very closely. And it was really wonderful because I was a bit worried about what it'd be like to work with everyone from different countries, but it was such a wonderful working experience. But I think that because of the circumstances, everyone really pulled together to get everything done, which was really wonderful. But it was strange, and most our sets were on a back lot in this very large studio in Batam. And what also happened was that we were doing construction and dressing, and because it was a backlot and nothing else was being filmed there, as things would get built, we would dress. So unlike a lot of other Indian projects where locations are so difficult to get your hands on and so expensive, here we could dress a set and tweak and adjust and add a little elements for quite a while, because we could dress a set and leave it, even if we were shooting there, let's say 10 days later, which is very unusual, especially in the Indian system.
I'm curious to know which of the sets that you worked on was your favorite. I definitely really enjoyed the set for the ring, the boxing ring, the fighting ring. Do you have a favorite one that you got to get a hand on?
So I have to say, I love the boxing ring as well. My other favorite set was actually the Hijra temple.
Mm.
And I think one of the reasons for that being one of my favorite sets was because we took a derelict building in the middle of a forest, and we literally converted that into a temple. And I was so impressed with the skills of the Indonesian team who did the greens and um, the paint team and everything. They were so incredible, and it was just one of those magical transformations, because we designed that set in a manner where you incorporated the trees and the greenery into the space. So for me, that was a very special set.
For sure. Did you get to work on the punching bag? Because I know that probably had to go through a couple iterations
Yeah.
because of how the correct thing is getting.
Yes, we did actually. I did actually. And we put together the punching bag, and we found references of. So, in fact, Dave was very involved as a director in a lot of the art, especially the specific art elements. And the punching bag was one of them. And we looked at designs of old matchboxes and things like that,
Wow.
and used that as a inspiration, because the design of old matchboxes is quite similar to the way the logos and all were done on things like rice bags, because that's what it originally was. It was a gunny sack that in our mind would contain rice or wheat. So that's what we used as a inspiration.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I'm curious too. Like, there was so much like fight choreography going on, specifically the entire finale sequence. I'm just curious, like, from an art department standpoint, a lot of things got destroyed. So I'm curious how you tackled that, how you went about rebuilding certain things,
Multiple
multiple
takes.
takes. Yeah, how
Like the
that was
kitchen
like.
fight scene.
Especially that.
So this is something that is true about, I think, a lot of fight scenes across the world, okay? Is one, you try and shoot them as much as possible in order, so that you don't have to, you break things, and as they break, then you can use that as the broken bit in the background.
Yeah.
You're right.
Right? So one, you try and shoot it in order. Second, you try and get all the drama done out of the way. And in our case, it was very difficult, because you probably read in some of the interviews of Dave about how he broke his finger halfway
Yeah.
through the filming of the film. So what ended up happening because of his injury is that in almost every location, we shot the non-fighting parts of that location first, and then had to go back to it sometimes 2-3 weeks later
When he was
to
healed.
actually get the fight, so that his hand had healed at least a little bit before we could do the rest of it. And one of the things that's always discussed between the director, the cinematographer, the fight choreographer, everyone in the beginning, is that, okay, for this particular scene, if we are shooting, say, someone landing, like for example, in the wrestling ring, we had one of the fighters getting thrown out the ring and landing on a table and the table collapsing. Okay, so how many cameras will we have on it? How many angles do we need to shoot it from? As a result, how many takes will we need for camera? How many takes will we need for fight choreography? Accordingly, how many dupes will art department need to make of that particular breakable table? right? So
Gosh.
you have to actually plan well in advance, because they can't be like, oh, we discussed 3, but actually we need 6. We don't have 6, and things take time to make. So this is one of those things that has to be discussed in any action that you do, whether it's a vase breaking on someone's head, or a table breaking, or in fact, the scene where he goes to the fish tank and stuff like that. It all has to be planned down to the T. So everything is discussed. Literally every department is there at the same time, from costume to makeup to everyone, to just figure out the logistics of shooting the fight sequence. And art department has to do many, very often, at least 3 is the standard when it comes to making dupes. Sometimes it's more, but 3 is standard and minimum normally. And the other thing that people don't realize is you actually have to reset it. So what does the entire crew do while you're removing the debris of the previous sequence and making it look new again? So that the first AD plays a really crucial part, because he has to figure out, okay, can I do a lunch break in between just to like not waste time? And or like, can we shoot something else? Or do we just have no option but to wait around? So all those things also come into play.
And I imagine you'll have to work hand in hand with a continuity coordinator to
Oh,
make sure that
yes.
everything looks the same.
The continuity coordinator is a really important person in all our lives. But on most films, there's a continuity coordinator, but the art department also tries to maintain its own continuity. Like, for example, they'll take photos of, say that in one scene, a table breaks, and the next scene, they're coming back and there's the remains of the broken table. So they'll photograph it to every detail. They'll collect the little pieces of very distinctive glass, all those things. So the on-set, the art department team that's on set will always maintain its own continuity photos as well.
I think one really big impactful thing for me in Monkey Man was the lighting and how powerful it was throughout the film. How does the art department, especially set decoration and set designing, have this conversation with the lighting department on, like, if we have specific sets, we want to make sure that they don't reflect, or that they're lit the proper way that they're supposed to be based on the material? I don't know if that's a conversation that's had.
Of course. Of course, that's a conversation. And in fact, one of the things that we do is we have a camera test and a look test. So for example, for Monkey Man, for a lot of our big sets, we built small, by small, I mean about 8 foot or 10 feet wide. In India, we work in feet, but say 3 meters wide by 3 meters tall walls in the correct color and texture, so that then the costume team can put their costumes in front of the wall to see how the colors go together. We'll have a few key props. The lighting team will light the space as they might want to envision lighting the space. Now, it's only a small patch of wall, but just to see how the materials are interacting with each other and things like that. Now, we didn't manage to do this for every space, but we did it for a lot of our key spaces, like the spaces which we were in for longer and the more complicated spaces. And we did this before we started shooting. Like, this was, I think, 2 or 3 weeks before we started shooting, when we were already in Batam as a part of pre-production. So as I was saying, I did part of the pre-production in India, and the rest in Batam in Indonesia. And we always put that together, because you need to see how the colors of different departments are interacting with each other.
That's really interesting. I think that's something that is not really thought about much.
At least as far as like student or beginner filmmakers go, like that's something that I've never considered, but it just makes so much sense to do that,
And
because
so
it
many
would
moving
save you
pieces.
so much time, like staring at your film being like, why does it look this way? Like if you had done all the extra work, then yeah, you'd have your result.
Yeah, because at that stage, it's very easy to be like, okay, the colors of the costume. And so, for example, Nidhhi was completely involved. I know you probably had a conversation with her, was very involved in this as well, because you place, even if you don't have the exact costume ready, you place something close to what you're envisioning or in the colors you're envisioning. And then you shoot with the same camera you're going to be shooting the film on, so that you're, as much as possible, making your shoot day easier, so that there are less surprises. And even otherwise, Dave as a director and Sharon as the cinematographer, especially because everything was in the same contained space, would come across and take walks um, through the sets on different days while the work was still in progress. And we would talk about, oh, we need to add a light here, we need to remove a light from here, what needs to get tweaked. And this happens in different ways in different projects. And in the case of Monkey Man, because everything was happening in the same studio backlot, it was quite easy to do in person. But on other projects, sometimes you just show photos of the space to the director and cinematographer. So, and in many projects, at least, paint swatches, whether you always paint swatches and get them approved in advance, just so that there's no sudden surprises.
Yeah.
That's really amazing.
Yeah.
So
And color palettes really do have to work across departments.
right.
So it's very important to work together.
Mm-hmm. Overall, what do you think was the most memorable moment you had on Monkey Man?
So I think there were a couple of them. I really enjoyed the shooting of the fight sequence in the bathroom and the going through the aquarium in one sense, because that was very fun, and we talked it to death. And so finally, when we did it, it was literally every little part of that was discussed, and what could happen, what should happen, how we're going to get it right. That was very memorable. But I think the other thing that for me was very, very memorable was the bit that Kid, which is Dave's character, was in the courtyard of the temple, and he was boxing to the beat of the tabla, and we had gotten Zakir Hussain, who is a maestro, to come and do that, and it was incredible to be able to hear him play, and in a manner where he was also working with the music and the rhythm of Dave's punching and improvising. And I think that was incredible because he's really a genius.
Two things on that. So the drumming scene was definitely really amazing. And
Yeah,
when we watched it in theaters, I was just in awe
Yeah.
at how much coordination. And it's crazy to think that there was a lot of improvisation in there.
there was a lot of
It
improvisation
was
in
like
there.
dancing almost
Yeah.
in that sense.
Definitely.
And then to what you mentioned earlier, the fishes, were there actual fishes in there?
So I'll tell you how we did it. For the entire sequence, there were fish. For the bit that we were doing where the fish tank actually exploded, we pulled the fish out for that bit. So for the rest of the sequence, there were real fish inside, but you can't hurt the animals. So they were fished out and put into a smaller fish tank and moved offset for the scene where the fish tank breaks.
I mean, that scene came out amazing. So much so
Yeah,
that
that
it's in
scene
one
came
of
out
the
amazing.
trailers.
I definitely didn't notice the fish being removed.
No, I didn't.
It happened so
No, I
quick.
think they might have put some back in post.
That makes sense. Yeah. So we've asked this question to some people, and I'm curious what your answer would be. But what is a movie that you have watched recently that you would recommend?
So the last movie which I watched, which I really enjoyed, is a movie called Lapata Ladies, which is a Hindi film, Bollywood film. And it's a very sweet, simple, well, maybe not simple, but it's very sweet story. And it's just so well told. And every department, you can tell, is really working together. That was a real pleasure to watch. I think it's on Prime Video. It's either on Prime Video or Netflix, one of the two of them. And it's a Bollywood film, and you must watch it.
Awesome. Thank you.
I love a nice, relaxing film, especially coming off of Monkey Man.
Yeah.
You
So
know,
completely opposite. This is a bit of like a small town family drama.
I see.
Okay. I like that. And
Yeah.
to our audience, as you might know, a lot of our audience are people that are either in the industry or want to be in the industry. So I'm curious, what piece of advice or message would you tell them for people that are specifically interested in art department?
For specifically interested in art department, I would say that figure out if you really enjoy it, because otherwise it's very difficult to do. That's one. And I think that the art department in general is quite happy to accept people from different backgrounds. I feel like you find a lot of people who are production designers or everyone who has just learned on the job and moved forward, who've accidentally fallen into it, whether they have a film background or a design background. I think it is just to enjoy it and also to constantly upgrade your skills if you're in the process, because you can come from anywhere. Like you can come from a non-art or non-film background, but if you get your foot in the door, be enthusiastic, work hard, you'll get far. But then simultaneously upgrade your skills so that you become better at what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think always carry a measuring tape with you wherever you go.
That's great.
Yeah, I think that one's very important because everyone's suddenly like, oh, we have to like.
How big's the wall?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man. Is there anywhere that our listeners can follow you or see any updates on work you're going to be working on?
I think Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah. So my handle is just Yasmin Sethi, which is my name. And I think Instagram is the only real social media I'm on. But I have a website which is almost done, so hopefully soon.
Exciting. Is there
Awesome.
Yeah.
anything right now that you can tell us about any work that might be coming up?
In the recent past, actually, in a lot of the films that I was working on are kind of out, like they've all just been released.
Okay.
And I moved between doing long format, which is film and web series, and doing advertising. So
I see.
I did a couple of back-to-back film and OTT projects. And for the last year and a half, I've just been doing advertising, which is nice because the timelines are short. You get to travel a bit, it's a little bit less, it's hectic while it's on, but between projects, you have a moment to breathe.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
So, yeah.
That's great. So, as to close off our podcast, we do this thing where we say and cut and clap our hands like that. So we would love if you could do us the honors. Just before you do that, though, we wanted to say thank you again so much for agreeing to be on our podcast. We have really enjoyed this conversation, and we'd love to have you back in the future for any other projects that you're working on then. So you can.
It's been a real pleasure to be here, and it's been a fun conversation. So we'd be love to be back at some stage in the future. Okay. And cut.
thank you so much for watching this episode of Cut. You can follow us on all social media, starting with Instagram as Cut the podcast. You can also follow us on YouTube as That Film Couple, which is the same handle for TikTok, That Film Couple for short form content. You can also follow us on Twitch as Sebasparra1K. And if you're watching right now on YouTube, you can find us on any podcast platform as Cut exclamation mark. Last but not least, you can follow me on Instagram as sebi.mp4.
And you can follow me at caitlin.mp4.
Thank you so much for being here one more week, and we'll see you in the next one.